Message from Starfleet Command, top priority.
You are listening to the TrekRanks Podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 115, featuring the top 5 high-concept Deep Space Nine episodes. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I am Jim Morehouse. I am the host of the TrekRanks Podcast, and tonight we are going high-concept as we return to another one of our favorite ongoing Trek series. It's the top 5 high-concept DS9 episodes, and of course, by high-concept, we're talking about those episodes of Deep Space Nine that can be summed up with, maybe one big idea or concept that pushes the boundaries a bit, but comes down to just, really one big original idea or a big sci-fi idea. So previously we've done high-concept Voyager, high-concept Enterprise episodes, and high-concept TNG, which means after today we'll only have TOS left on our high-concept list. But for now, we're going to tackle Deep Space Nine. And joining us for this topic tonight are two great guests. And really, this is basically a crossover episode with our friends at the Great Promenade Merchants Podcast. We have two co-hosts from that podcast joining us now. First up, returning for her 4th appearance on TrekRanks, it's our friend Heather Kirby. Welcome back, Heather.
I am so excited to be back. And every single one of my 3 previous appearances were series specific. So this is my Deep Space Nine one.
Oh my God.
They're all different series.
I never realized that until I'm just looking at the list here. You've done Voyager Guilty Pleasures, Enterprise Guilty Pleasures, Discovery Season 2, and now okay, next time we're gonna have to cross the streams and get you in for everything. And our second guest today is the other half of the Promenade Merchants. It's Mr. David Majors. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Jim. It is really great to be on. I'm excited. I feel like I'm sitting at I'm moving up from the lower decks now. I feel like I really just got promoted for my Star Trek podcast. I'm really excited. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, I'm excited too. I'm gonna ask you about your quick Trek origin story, but I gotta say the timing's fortuitous because I was just listening to you guys and heard that you just became a completist.
Yes,
having finished the voyage home. So tell us about that. Tell us about how you started your Trek fandom.
Well, as you said, Jim, I just finished my Star Trek completionism. The last thing I had to watch was the one with the whales, as it is affectionately called. My Star Trek origin story probably goes back even further than my own existence. I am a second-generation Trekkie on my mother's side. My mother was a fan of the original series, and through her, I began watching Star Trek through the first run of Star Trek The Next Generation while it was still in syndication. So my memories go far back as 1989, 1990. So I've at least been watching Star Trek in some form for about that long, and probably longer than anything else I've really been into. With all of the other podcasts that I do and have done, I would say that I was probably a Trekkie before anything else.
And I love second generation Trekkie. That is awesome. So is Deep Space Nine your favorite series?
It is. Yep. You can ask me, depending on the day, what my second favorite might be. But at the end of the day, I always end up going back to DS9 as my favorite. And it really does stand as maybe one of my favorite television shows of all time. I just feel like it is as good of a sci-fi television series as one can ask for and one can hope for.
I would say exactly the same, and depending on the day is a TrekRanks mantra. That's what we are all about. All right, let's get into our TrekRanks recalibration and get into this topic.
Let's start with something small, like a recalibration of the EPS manifolds.
As regular listeners will know by now, general order number 1 at the TrekRanks Charter is that we love Trek, and we love to rank Trek via some deep dive topics just to get the conversation started. And remember, it's not about the ranks. That's just our excuse to talk about Star Trek.
But what is that Vulcan motto? Infinite diversity.
In infinite combinations.
And what is diversity? But a celebration of differences.
And as Topol and Dr. Flox just said, Trek Ranks is basically just a big old celebration of differences. There are no wrong answers at Trek Ranks. It's not about...
So wait, hold on. When you said high concept, we weren't talking about like the Snake Leaf episode in Picard, right? or the episode in Discovery where Tilly like was hanging out with the Orions, right? So high concept, that's not what we meant.
Or Stamets and his mycelial mix-up. But hey, it just depends on your prime directive. All right,
I'm kidding.
I love it. So, yeah, it's not about being right or definitive in any way. It's about sharing the things we love about Trek, and we love it all, from TOS to TNG, straight through the Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline, and now Discovery, Short Trek, Star Trek Picard, Lower Decks. It's all fair game here on the Trek Ranks Podcast.
Black alert. Black alert.
And a reminder that this episode of Trek Ranks is current through 801 episodes of Star Trek, which currently translates to the 3rd season of Star Trek Discovery. But today we're just going to talk about Deep Space Nine mostly.
I've boosted power to the communications bandwidth.
And we appreciate that, Mr. Kim. You can find Trek Ranks on Subspace at TrekRanks.com, and you can contact me directly on Twitter at TrekRanks or at Enterprise Extra, or you can call and leave us a message with your own picks at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. Okay, Heather and David, let's find out how everybody can get a hold of you guys on Subspace. Heather.
Well, the easiest place to find me is on Twitter. It's at nerdygal33. My username is never apologize for being nerdy, because that's the best advice I can give anyone.
I love it. And David, how about you on Twitter?
Well, everyone out there, if you want to follow me on Twitter and talk about lots of stuff, you can do so at callmedjm. Those are my initials. Call me DJM, because that's what I also go by on the internet. Call me DJM. That's my Twitter handle.
It's a pretty catchy handle, I gotta admit. All right,
well, wait a minute. Don't forget the podcast now.
Oh yeah, you guys promote Promenade Merchants, or you can do it we'll do it at the end too.
Figured we'd save it for the end, but
yeah.
Hey, we do both times.
It's a great podcast. Everybody listen. You guys pump it at the end. Let's get into this topic with our prime directives.
But what you're proposing is exactly the kind of tampering the Prime Directive prohibits.
Okay, Heather and David, high concept is always an interesting topic on Trek Ranks. People tend to approach it in different ways. For the most part, it's about a big single idea, but it's also can be super simple. It can be more complex, like a big sci-fi conceit, which is how I usually end up looking at it. So you never quite know what we're going to get with high concept picks. So Heather and David, I want to hear how you guys approach the topic, how you narrowed down your listing and came up with the direction you went. So Heather, let's start with you. How did you narrow down your picks?
Well, I started with the simple idea of episodes that were unique to DS9. So I wanted episodes that you wouldn't be able to find, or themes of the episode that you wouldn't be able to find on other series of Star Trek.
Very interesting. I like that.
And when I came up with my list, I realized that there were different subsections of that topic that these episodes kind of fell into. So I made a point to pick one episode from each kind of subtopic of that, which I'm not going to share that right now because that might kind of give away what some of my picks are, but you'll find that out when we go through the round.
Okay. Does subtopic mean they're all kind of different?
They're all kind of different. Okay, we'll use, for example, there's only one episode that focuses on trills, and then there might only be one episode that focuses on time travel.
Got it. Yeah, something like that. I get it. Okay. How about you, David? How did you break it all down?
When I was asked to be on and the theme was high concept, I really thought of the idea of episodes of DS9 that have a theme, because I've always believed that Star Trek is at its best when there is a theme, when they are telling a thematic story that isn't just necessarily about the cast or the characters or the universe that Star Trek exists in. It's telling a theme, maybe not necessarily a moral, but it's giving you an idea of something that you can translate into the real world. And that's kind of what I went with my 5 picks. It's the idea of these episodes of DS9 have a theme that can be applied to the real world. And for the record, I did not, because I feel like just in my Trek podcasting and just in general, I scratched Far Beyond the Stars, I scratched The Visitor, and I scratched In the Pale Moonlight, because I've done those several times, and I felt like challenging myself a little bit.
Well, we love deep cuts here on Trek Ranks, so that sounds like an awesome way to get a little deeper into the oeuvre
of Deep Space Nine. Oh, yeah. I don't know if Heather told you, I'm super pretentious.
Thank you. I always struggle with that word, and I'm going to leave all that in because that was funny. Okay, so for me, I love high concept episodes. And for the last one, for TNG, I did something really different. I picked 5 episodes that I'd never talked about before on Trek Rank. And so I thought about doing something different on this one. And what came to me as I was looking through these episodes, I chose, so the theme kind of came up. All 5 of my picks have a similar theme. They are all part of a big, huge, they're all 5 excellent high concept DS9 episodes on their own, but they all connect into this amazing overarching high concept theme that runs through Deep Space Nine that you'll find out when I start going through my picks. But suffice it to say, the theme is basically that our lead character is a god. So they all tie into that at some level. Basically a god. Anyway, I think we're ready to get into this. First Cadet Catan, introduce us to the new order of things.
It'll be alphas like us that determine the future of this quadrant. That will be the new order of things.
Thank you, First Cadet Catan. As always, a quick reminder on how we're going to go through the order of things. First, everyone will start with their 5-word summary and a hashtag to tease their pick. Then we'll each reveal our high-concept Deep Space Nine episode and the specific reasons we're highlighting it. And at the end, we'll ask everyone for a few secondary system selections for the picks that just missed our list. And as always, this is appropriate. If we have any duplicate picks, make sure you listen for the Defiant Torpedoes. Okay, Heather, let's kick this off with you. What's your number 5 pick for your top 5 high concept DS9 episode? I cannot wait to hear this.
All right, number 5, 5-word summary. If you hate her that much, hashtag, why did you save her life? It is season 6, episode 17, Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night.
Wow. So this is a dark episode.
Yes, it is. The subtopic of this pick is time travel using the orb of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I went with this because there's a very much more obvious pick, which will be in my secondary systems in case anybody else picks it. It's a really dark episode, but I think it's a really interesting exploration of Kira's past that she didn't know anything about, and just really the high concept is how she got there, because an orb allowing her to travel through time. But ultimately the fact that even though she had the ability to let her mother die along with Dukat, she ended up saving them in the end. That's one thing I really kind of like about the episode, because even though it was really dark and she discovered things about her mother that she didn't know, and she had an entirely different perspective, she still had enough love to be like, okay, I can't go through with it, and I gotta save her ultimately.
I don't know if there's ever been a more appropriately dark title for a dark episode than Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. This episode it's a tough one to watch and get through, but it adds so much to Kira's backstory, and I love seeing the stuff with her as a child, and those flashbacks. David, what's your take on Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night?
I found this to be an incredibly haunting episode, and the one thing that DS9 did so incredibly well is that they gave us a villain in Gul Dukat, And they made him such an incredibly detailed, fleshed out character. Yes, he was the bad guy. He was the prefect of Bajor, the head of the Cardassian station Terok Nor. But with this episode and others, you see that he's not a complete monster in some ways. And we see this unending fascination with the women of the Nerys family that Kira has to witness. And since the beginning, you see that Kira has always had this hatred for Dukat, and you see just how deep it really runs between the two of them. And I just think that it makes Gul Dukat that much more fascinating of a character.
And that much more creepy. This guy, he is the worst. All right, this is an awesome deep cut pick, Heather. I love it. I'm not sure if it's ever. I think it's probably been picked once or twice on Trek Ranks. David, how about you? What's your number 5 pick?
My number 5. We'll start with my 5 words. Rom, the Ferengi Union Man. # strike. Yes. And I'm talking about Bar Association.
Of course.
I really just enjoy the idea of a Ferengi strike, because the Ferengis are the unabashed, unending, perpetual capitalists of the Star Trek universe. And they say in this episode that Ferengi don't want to change the system. They want to find a way to control the system so they can exploit everybody else. And Rom figures out, hey, that's not okay. And he also realizes Lita, who he really likes, isn't happy. So they put this together. They form a union. And it's just a great idea to show, one, I believe that Ira Burr and Armin Shimmerman talked about the fact that you see these things that show you labor problems and union issues and trying to make a union work, and then seeing business owners brushing up against it. And then you see the FCA brushing up against the union and all of these things going on. And it was very true to life in a lot of ways. And hearing the story from Chief O'Brien about how his ancestor was a union man and how that inspired Rom.
You said the other day I should form a union, so I did.
Rom, I was speaking theoretically.
And I put your theory into practice. All of Quark's employees have joined. We're gonna force Quark to treat us better. I hope.
A union, huh? Good for you.
You know about unions?
Who do you think led the Pennsylvania coal miners during the anthracite strike of 1902?
I have no idea.
Sean Aloysius O'Brien.
I didn't know that.
11 months those mines were closed. And they didn't open again until all the miners' demands were met.
You mean we should force Quark to close the bar?
Only as a last resort. I mean, if he's reasonable about your request, there's no need to strike.
Quark reasonable? Ha! Unlikely. You'll have to strike, mark my words. And when you do, you'll have to be strong.
Just like Sean O'Brien.
Exactly. You know, he had the biggest funeral in all of Western Pennsylvania.
Funeral?
They fished his body out of the Allegheny River a week before the strike ended. 32 bullets he had in him. Or was it 34?
No. He died a hero.
He was more than a hero. He was a union man.
Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. It was just a great story that can be applied to the real world, of the idea of the strength of labor unions and power to the people, and how big businesses, you have to keep them in check.
It's amazing that this episode's smack in the middle of Deep Space Nine's run. The way it uses Ferengi, it makes it so relevant. It's like you said, the theme, your theme here is really, really clear when you're watching this episode, and you see the statement that's being made by Ira Stephen Bear and his crew. Heather, what's your take on Bar Association?
Well, I love the Ferengi episodes of DS9 in general. I think they're just fun. But this is definitely one of the standouts where it makes a definitive statement that relates to real world issues. And I think it's perfect. It's one of those things that you don't think, especially when you watch a sci-fi show, that it can relate back in that way. And they found a perfect way to do that.
Yeah, and we get some Jeffrey Combs as Brunt. I think this is Brunt's first appearance, right? Is this where he shows up for the first time? No, because he was in Family Business earlier. Yep. It's the whole FCA thing, the whole strike, and the fact that this is another example of Star Trek being able to tell any kind of story. I love this episode. It's one that I think people appreciate more and more as time goes by. For sure, when I first saw this as a kid, I was like, I want space battles, but now you watch it and it's like, oh man, this is it's so smart. I love it. Okay, let's go to my round 5 pick, the first in my theme of episodes, 5 words and a hashtag. 3 Vipers guide the Cisco, hashtag through the temple gates, and it is Deep Space Nine Season 3 Destiny. I love this episode. I love that Cisco spends most of his time in this episode keeping Bajoran prophecy. This is the one where they have the Trakor's third prophecy of a bunch of bad things that's going to happen, and there's a Vedic there telling Cisco, he's got to follow this prophecy, and Cisco the whole time is like keeping it all at an arm's distance. He's trying to deny that there's any kind of mysticism or prophecy stuff actually playing out via the prophets and the wormhole aliens. And I love there's this moment, and this is the start of where Cisco starts to change just a little bit. There's a moment when he says, "Hey, Major, sorry, where you see a sword of stars, I see a comet. Where you see Vipers, I see 3 scientists. And where you see the emissary, I see a Starfleet officer." I love that moment because that's what I would expect from a Starfleet officer. That's what you expect. But that all starts to change a little bit at the end of this episode. I love the way the storytelling in this one comes together. It's just really cleverly told, the way the prophecy actually plays out, but in a different context, which is kind of how people control and alter doctrine and change meanings of 2,000-year-old words.
Are you saying that the arrival of the Cardassian scientists was foretold in a Bajoran prophecy?
Exactly. Trakor's words are clear. When the river wakes, stirred once more to Janer's side, 3 Vipers will return to their nest in the sky. The river has awoken, emissary.
Kuyal Dam was just put back into operation to divert water to the city.
Just as Trekor prophesied over 3,000 years ago. And even now, the Vipers are making their way here.
And I take it you think the Vipers are a reference to the Cardassian scientists?
Yes. And this station is their nest in the sky.
And how exactly is their presence here going to bring destruction on us all?
Trekor said when the Vipers try to peer through the temple gates, a sword of stars will appear in the heavens. The temple will burn and the gates will be cast open.
I really love this episode. Trakor's third prophecy, when the river wakes, stirred once more, 3 Vipers will return to the nest in the sky. A classic for me. David, what's your take on Destiny?
I loved this episode because one of the things that I always loved about DS9 is that differentiated itself and challenged the ideas of Star Trek, is that it wasn't afraid to take science, as it were, the idea of science and science fiction, moving us beyond the ideas of our old superstitions, and kind of challenging it with a little bit of that religious mysticism that came with the Bajoran prophets, and putting those together with a Starfleet officer. And when you start seeing these things with the prophets and the orbs and the prophecies that are involving Benjamin Sisko, a Starfleet officer, it's one of those things, and I'm going to talk about this later on, that really takes the idea of what Star Trek is, quote unquote, Gene Roddenberry's vision, and challenges it. And I love it for that.
Yeah, I love that. We'll definitely talk more about this big DS9 topic as we get into further picks. Heather, what's your take on Destiny?
So I gotta admit, I'm due for a DS9 rewatch. I do remember this episode, but the biggest thing that stuck out to me about this one was the Kardashian scientists in it.
Yeah.
So I love that aspect of seeing Cardassians that aren't exactly military, and it's our first look at seeing Cardassians that are scientists and more civilian rather than the military aspect of them. So I love that. But I'm really excited because one of my favorite the basic storyline of Sisko's journey, from understanding he's the emissary to where he gets at the end of season 7, is one of my favorite parts of DS9. So I'm excited to explore that through your picks.
That's what's happening here. This is an episode that always feels fresh. It's really, really, really cleverly told, and I love it. Okay, let's get to round 4. Heather, what's your number 4 pick?
So number 4, 5 words, needing the help of a murderer. # logic demanded it. It is season 7, episode 13, Field of Fire.
Another deep cut. I love it.
And this is my Trill-centric episode because I have a whole, actually, that's the one I have the most in my secondary system. The whole exploration of what Trills are and how they connect to one another and use each other's memories. I think the whole idea of it is really high concept, but I specifically chose this one as my Trill episode because I love Esri. So all the other ones were Jadzia.
We're big Esri fans. We're big Esri fans on Promenade.
She's great. Yeah. I love her too. It's absolutely incredible what she did in one season.
Yeah, just her using the Trill ritual and actually embracing the memories of Duran, who was a murderer, in order to solve these murders on the station. I think it took a lot of guts. It took a lot of bravery to do that, because especially while Jadzia embraced his consciousness after he came to life in the episode Equilibrium, which is on my secondary systems.
Yeah.
She still kind of didn't want anything to do with him, and she still wanted to kind of hide those memories. And Esri used it to her advantage in this episode and ultimately solved the case and found the murderer. And so they only lost 3 lives in the process. So, yeah.
It's a great Esri episode. Nicole DeBoer is fantastic in it. It's a great sci-fi conceit. I love the transporting bullet idea. Is really, really cool and original. I love Duran. Everything about that character and the fact that it lives inside Dax is really cool. David, what's your take on Field of Fire? Underrated episode.
Field of Fire. Now, this reminds me that I'm due for a DS9 rewatch. I love Duran Dax.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, I guess there's that part of me that's a little dark and twisted. And the fact that Esri had to tap into that to solve this, a murder mystery, in fact.
I was going to say, this is a murder mystery episode, too.
It's very, dare I say, Silent of the Lambs-esque.
Yeah.
Yes.
In addressing Duran Dax being the consultant for this. It's really fascinating if you think about it, that you have to get into the mind of a killer to find out what a killer is doing. And it's really, really good. And when you have that part of yourself inside of you, what do you do to contain it?
Yeah, I love that. You said the murder mystery part. So in our first 4 episodes, we have just a classic whodunit, and then we also have the labor stripe story. So this series can do anything. It literally can do anything. David, what's your number 4 pick?
My number 4. Let the truth be told. #Tekeni Gamor. And that episode is Ties of Blood and Water.
God, you guys are going deep, and I love it.
This was the episode where Tekeni Gamor, the Cardassian dissident, returns to DS9 to talk with his now friend Kira Nerys, and tells her that she's dying, or he's dying, rather, not Kira, sorry. And as a part of his last days, he wants to tell Kira his enemies and things happening in the Cardassian government is sort of a final confession. And he wants to tell these to Nerys, who he considers almost a surrogate daughter.
I love everything about Gamora. Lawrence Pressman's a fantastic actor. I love that they brought him back from Second Skin. He was so impactful in Second Skin. All these picks that we have are such great world-building episodes, too, because, again, in Second Skin, you've got these dissidents, and you see a more of the Cardassian world. And in this episode, oh, my God, it's so heartfelt the way they interact. And I also love the little bit of the secondary story when Dukat and Weyoun show up, and they don't want him to be telling any secrets. So,
and just one of the great comedic moments in DS9 is when there is, I believe this is the episode where Weyoun drinks
the poison,
turns out to be poison, and Dukat just looks at him horrified, just like, "Oh yeah, this is totally poison. This is totally toxic. This would absolutely kill him." Yeah. And Dukat just looks over like, "What are you doing?" And Weyoun is just like, "Oh, it's fine. We're genetically programmed. We're fine. I'm fine."
He's like, it's really helpful when you're a diplomat to be able to drink poison. Heather, what's your take on Ties of Blood and Water? Another awesome deep cut.
Oh yeah, this is definitely incredible. Because I wasn't quite sure where it was going, and then you mentioned Kenny Gamora, and I'm like, okay, yeah, now I know where you're going with this. But yeah, it's an incredible episode, and it's an incredible character, and that's one of the best parts of DS9 is them revisiting characters that only came up in one previous episode, and they go back to it, and that doesn't get to happen that often. I mean, it happens in Star Trek, but it doesn't happen that often, and it's something that happens a lot on DS9 just because of it being on a space station and less of a spaceship. So it's another thing that's very unique to the show, and I think very high concept.
No, that's a great point. This is, I mean, it happens in Star Trek because it happened on Deep Space Nine so often.
Yeah.
So, and this is a great example of picking up a cool little thread and telling another original story that just adds so much to Cardassia and to Kira. And again, this is another one with flashbacks to Kira in the occupation. Really cool. Okay, let's go to my round 4 pick. 5 words on hashtag. The Sisko embraces his path. Hashtag down with Dejaras, down with Doctrine. This is from season 4. A Session, another one of my favorite episodes. I love how simple this episode is. Basically, an old timer comes back from 3,000 years through the wormhole and says he's the emissary, and Sisko is more than happy to say, "Yep, you're the emissary. It's not me. I'm happy to give that up." So this episode floored me when it first aired. From the beginning with the emissary and Kaiopaka and all the kind of religious context of Bajor's people and Kira, I just kept expecting at some point that Sisko, as the Sisko, would veer into some kind of normal storytelling vernacular for Trek. Just like you just don't expect the showrunners and writers to create an episode like this where at the end I'm like, wait, so Captain Sisko really is the emissary and he's embracing it and he likes it? That just blew me away halfway through this series run. I just always expected that was not going to be the direction they went. It's really intelligent episode, really well written. Akorum, the Bajoran that comes back, is the kind of religious zealot that I love to hate. And and I love, there's a great, amazing conversation about faith that Odo and Kira have when they're standing there watching Akorum talk about Dejaras and claim the role of emissary. And Odo's like, so last week you thought Sisko was the emissary. Now you think it's Akorum. Does that mean Sisko never was? And she's like, whatever. You don't understand. It's because I have faith. And he's like, that really doesn't make any sense. But I love it. the whole faith science argument, they're all presented here. They're all presented very respectfully, even though I have a serious slant toward one. And yeah, I just I love this episode. It's crazy to me how much this episode spoke to me, even though I'm not a person of faith. Heather, what's your take?
So this was actually one of the episodes I watched during my TrekRanks homework.
Yep.
It didn't make my list, but I do love the episode. I think it's just really incredible to watch Sisko go through the process of the episode of really embracing his role as the emissary.
Right.
Because at like you said at the start, when he's just like, yeah, no, you can have it. I don't want it anymore. It's fine. But then he's watching what's happening and the zealotry that Akorum brings to the Bajorans, and he's watching what it's doing to people that he knows and cares about, like Kira. And he realizes that, you know, he has to do something. And it's just such a unique concept where it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go into the wormhole and talk to the prophets and work this whole thing out ourselves. Like, how many other religions could you just sit there and go say, oh yeah, we're going to go to their holy temple and actually talk to them? But you can do that with the prophets. And it's just so unique and wonderful. And I love how, like, that whole scene where the two of them are in there talking with the prophets, and Akorum realizes that he's not meant to be the emissary. It is actually Sisko.
Yeah,
it feels like everything coming full circle right there.
It's pretty cool when the wormhole aliens are like, yeah, no, you are of Bajor. David, what's your take on this session?
Number one, the caste system. Yuck.
Oh, God. So gross.
It really kind of put into light the idea of what religious text and religious scripture can do to be corrupted and twisted for personal gain. And it really highlighted that, and it really showed what that can do. And kudos to Captain Sisko for stepping in and realizing that this would not be good for Bajor at all. And the prophets clearly understood that too. I thought this was a really enjoyable episode because I think that Sisko episodes, sometimes they can lean a little bit too much into him being the emissary and doing stuff with the prophets and not enough of him being a Starfleet captain. But I think this is one of the better ones, and it really showed him as a complete figure, not just being a Starfleet captain where he has that moral core of what is right and wrong, but also being the emissary and being who the Bajorans needed him to be.
That high concept that you just referenced might just come up in a few more of my picks. All right, let's do it. It's the soup round. Heather, what's your number 3 pick?
Eat your soup, courtesy of a loyal establishment. Jolan True.
All right. So for the soup round, I went with the episode that, you know, I just love.
Awesome.
So 5 words are holographic games with deadly consequences. Hashtag Bashir. Julian Bashir.
I love it.
It is season 4, episode 9, Our Man Bashir. Yeah, I'm a huge James Bond fan. So I unabashedly love this episode due to the thematic James Bondness of it all.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is really high concept for a holodeck episode because it's one of the only holodeck episodes where, you know, it really is life or death. And the characters, like our main crew, are put in the position unknowingly. So, like, a lot of times when they end up in severe consequences on the holodeck, they knew what they were getting into a little bit, and something crazy happens, but they chose to be there. Like when the computer puts Sisko and Kira and O'Brien and Worf and Jadzia into these holodeck characters, like, they didn't choose to do that. So they're put in a position where Bashir is responsible for them, and he needs to make sure nothing happens to all of them. And
I think you meant.
I think it's kind of high concept on that aspect.
I think he meant Falcon, Honey Bear, and Mona Loves It.
And Hippocrates, no.
I know Hippocrates, of course. Incredible episode. I mean, it's an absolute joy to watch, to rewatch. A perfect homage to James Bond's super high concept, really clever use of the holodeck. I love it. It never gets old. And then what it says with Garrick as a spy and being so upset with the way Julian's approaching playing a spy. It's just it's just really, really smart stuff. David, what's your take on Our Man Bashir?
Every once in a while on Promenade, Heather will allow me to just be terrible, just be the worst. And I appreciate that. So I'm just going to keep this short and sweet. Anastasia Kamenanov. Thank you.
Can't follow that up with anything. I love it. This is so good. All right, David, what's your super round pick? Your third round pick?
I will get the cream of broccoli with cheddar.
Good.
My number 3 will be fresh take on a standard. Hashtag Worf Trial.
Oh, so good.
And this episode is Rules of Engagement, directed by the one and only LeVar Burton.
Oh, so good. So now we have a courtroom battle, too, as another example of what this show can do. So good. I love your 5 words.
I loved this episode. It is definitely my favorite Star Trek courtroom episode for so many reasons. You see, one of my favorite things, as I've said on several podcasts, is when you see actors in Star Trek really, really act like super hard. Heather, this is the acting portion of the podcast. And we see Avery Brooks and Ron Canada, who plays the Klingon lawyer, really getting into it in this courtroom. And it's really great, number 1. And number 2, I loved the storytelling device of this episode where the witness testimonies were talking directly to the camera. And that was just a really, really intriguing way to do this. It was something that hadn't really been done in Star Trek before, and it was really well done. And then at the end of this episode, you get to see a very rare chance to see the Worf and Sisko dynamic, with Captain Sisko as Worf's mentor, which he didn't really get much of on TNG, but we got quite a bit of it here on DS9. And just overall, just in my opinion, a great episode. My favorite Star Trek trial episode of the entire franchise.
You can listen to top 5 courtroom dramas. I think it was like episode 49 of TrekRanks. Anyway, this one finished high. Yeah, that's right. We did all the Law and Order drops. I love this episode. It's so well written. This is just, I mean, look at these picks. We're going to review them in a minute, but every one of these is just so well written. And this is just such a smart episode when Ch'Pok, when he baits Worf and then Sisko just turns it right around on him. You care to step onto my battlefield? So good.
Admiral, I apologize for interrupting your deliberations, but I have some new evidence I'd like to present.
Very well.
I'd like Advocate Ch'Pok to evaluate the evidence as an expert witness on the Klingon Empire.
I will not compel you to testify, Advocate.
Care to step onto my battlefield?
This is an absolute fantastic episode. And LeVar Burton, brilliant job with kind of some of the spin on the point of view storytelling with the recapping of the flashback. I love it. I could talk about it all day. Heather, Rules of Engagement, what's your take?
Oh yeah, it's definitely, because like I said, I'm due for a rewatch, but it's one of those episodes I remember, even though it's been a while since I watched it. So you know it's that good when you can still remember it, even though it's been a while. It's just the best part about having Worf on DS9 is I love the dynamic between Worf and Sisko, because I think they really do have a mentor-mentee relationship, and I think that's really good for Worf's character, and I like seeing that between the two of them.
And I will watch Ron Canna read a telephone book. That guy is a great actor. Okay, here we go. My round 3 pick. So we have, and by the way, I'm going in chronological order if you haven't picked up on it. First, you have Cisco trying to keep it at an arm's distance and getting educated. And then my second
This podcast is high concept.
my second pick, he accepts being the emissary. And now, 5 words and a hashtag. The Cisco puts Bajor first, hashtag breaking from the Federation. It is Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 10, Rapture. Just another episode that knocked my socks off against someone that is not a person of faith and doesn't get into that. I always expected that Bajor is going to join the Federation. Of course, that's the premise of the show. That's what Star Trek does. Of course, they're going to join the Federation. So when this episode starts to unfold, and Cisco's just getting so obsessed with finding the city of Bahala, and it's more and more putting Starfleet's needs at arm's length again. So when it comes to the end, and it's Cisco literally barging into the room and saying, Bajor can't join the Federation.
Focus!
Oh, exactly. It's amazing storytelling. So smart, so layered, so contextualized. It just all blew me away. And I love this moment when he's got these visions, right? Because he's been touched by this prophet experience he's had. And he's just walking through the promenade. He's telling people, don't worry, your crops are going to be fine. And, oh, don't worry, Admiral Watley, your son forgives you. It's like, what is going on with this show? The time of reckoning is at hand. The prophets will weep. Their sorrow will consume the gateway to the temple. This whole storyline just blows me away. So Rapture is my pick. David, what's your take?
This probably was my number 6.
Yeah.
You said it all. And I just remember with that scene you just described where he was speaking to people on the station and it was like, how did he know it all? And the answer was simple. He's the emissary.
That's right.
And what really hit me especially about this episode was Kai Wynn, everybody's favorite Space Karen herself, finally came to the realization of, he really is the emissary.
Yep.
He really has the power of the prophets on his side. Okay.
That is so true. That's what this episode does for her. I love Space Karen. God, that's so good. Heather, what's your take?
Yeah, no, I remember being floored the first time I watched this episode because I was with you. I didn't think that they were actually going to completely go in this direction and have him put Bajor first. He's truly embodying his role as the emissary. And it was something that was totally unexpected, but yet made you go, okay, yeah, this is where it's going. And I can't wait to see what happens next. And that's definitely what this episode does.
Yeah, they always say that they were like the Deep Space Nine production being kind of the only series that never aired solo and was always kind of the stepchild and not really being watched as closely. This is the kind of episode that proves that, because this is the kind of powers that be, if they were paying attention, be like, wait, what are you doing with the captain? What is this? He's like a god? Anyway, I love it. Round 2, let's do it. Heather, what's your number 2 pick?
All right, number 2. 5 words are a dying woman's last wish, hashtag shouldn't have to mourn alone. It is season 6, episode 25, The Sound of Her Voice.
Oh.
And the subtopic of this pick is episodes that feature planets that have an energy barrier around them. Because there were multiple episodes I found where that was kind of like the theme. But I really love this episode because, I mean, it starts out and you think like they're going to save this Starfleet captain who crashed on this planet. And then you get hit at the very end with the realization that she's actually been there for 3 years. And so no matter what they did, they wouldn't have saved her. But they got to comfort her. And in a way, she comforted them. Like, this is like right in the middle of the Dominion War. They've lost so much. They all needed that conversations that they had with her over those 6 days that it took to get to that planet.
Repeat. This is a general distress call. I am a citizen of the United Federation of Planets and a Starfleet officer. If you can hear me, please respond. My government will reward you for any assistance you can offer. And most of all, you'll be my personal heroes. Repeat.
That's enough.
This is a general.
How long will it take us to reach her?
At maximum warp, 6 days.
Any other ships closer to that sector?
No, sir.
Mr. Worf, turn us around and set a course for the Ratharian sector.
Aye, sir.
Chief, I want you to establish a two-way comlink with this woman. And when you do, tell her her heroes are on the way.
Like, it's a sad episode, but it's ultimately, it's a good episode. I think it's something that the crew really needed to have that experience, and they're all better for it by the end of it.
Yeah, this is as high concept as it gets. I mean, the pitch is literally the whole crew's talking to kind of a disembodied voice, and we're going to get into all these different angles and deep character moments for the crew. And there's a great twist at the end. It's so good. It's another one of these somber episodes that does such a good job of setting up the overarching story of the Dominion War. I love it. Absolutely brilliant pick. David, what's your take on the sound of her voice?
This episode is very special to me because it is revolving around one of my favorite actresses of all time, Deborah Wilson, who is the voice of Captain Lisa Cusack in this episode. She is phenomenal in this, and
so good.
It really is just a very emotionally grabbing episode where one thing that I love in Star Trek oftentimes is when you see the crew talking with another Starfleet captain, and you see that connection, that bond that they have being Starfleet officers, that we are Starfleet vibe that they all share with one another. And I think this was really conveyed really, really well. She didn't know everything about what was happening with the Dominion War, and they talked about it with her, and they really gave her extra dimensions, and you really felt in such a short time that they were really growing connected with someone that they really saw as a comrade, as an ally. And that connection you can have with another Starfleet officer that's coming from somewhere else, it's really, really strong. And at the end of the episode where they toast to her, it was really, really profound. Just excellent episode.
So good. This is pretty sure this one's Ronald D. Moore, and I love your Deborah Wilson shout out from her. She used to play Uhura a lot on Mad TV, so she in their parodies. She's brilliant. That's good stuff. I love it. Okay, what's your number 2 pick, David?
My number 2, PTSD is a literal nightmare. Hashtag no more suffering. And this episode is Hard Time.
Ooh, I was wondering where you were going with this. Yeah. This is as hard as it gets.
Yes, it does. I've never personally been a big fan of the O'Brien must suffer thing that happens in DS9, but I believe this episode is the best example of it. PTSD. And the idea of trauma. Trauma is such a large, vague subject, and we see it in this episode in a number of different ways. We see the trauma of spending 20 years in prison for a crime that you really didn't commit. All of that living inside of your head. You see the trauma of having to come back to the real world and adapt and readjust to the real world that you saw so many war veterans have to deal with, like Chief O'Brien, and the difficulties that can lead to, and the trauma of self-hatred of what Chief O'Brien did to his cellmate in that prison that, again, only existed inside of his mind, and having to live with that, and Chief O'Brien being pushed to nearly killing himself. And it is just such a unbelievably profound episode that puts the concept of trauma and how we live and deal with that trauma in lots of different shades. And I think that Colin Meaney puts on an incredible performance, as does Sid Fadil, just does a great job pulling Miles O'Brien back from the brink, and just an incredible episode.
And shout out to HR. I love that actor too, Craig. It's like Weeson or Wesson. He's in some Brian De Palma films. This is a great pick. Super high concept. The execution is just, you just feel it. It's visceral. It's a nightmare. I think you put that in your 5 words in a hashtag. It's a literal nightmare. It just feels like this one is tough to watch.
This one's heavy.
It really, really is. Heather, what's your take on Hard Time?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good episode, but it is one of the very few Star Trek episodes that's really hard for me to watch.
Interesting.
It's that visceral and hard and terrifying at the same time. But yeah, super high concept. So great pick.
That's funny you say that, because I was thinking that's how I kind of, to help crystallize the thought for me. That's how I feel about Wrong Starker Than Death or Night. I have such a hard time watching that episode.
Well, that's me and The Visitor. I can't watch The Visitor.
I'm with that too. All right, let's close out round 2 with my 5 words and a hashtag. The Cisco willingly sacrifices Jake. Hashtag the prophets will protect him. It is from Deep Space Nine Season 6, The Reckoning. And now you have Ben coming all the way to the point that he's going to allow his good friend Kira and his son to potentially die to fulfill the will of the prophets in this, or the wormhole aliens, in this fight.
Benjamin, Worf is standing by in ops. He can trigger the chronoton generator at your command. You can still end this, Ben.
No, I've got to play this thing out.
That is your son out there.
Don't you think I know that? The prophets will protect him.
They're trying to kill him.
No, they're trying to destroy the Power Wraith. The prophets will not let anything happen to him.
How do you know that?
I know.
For me, it's absolutely bonkers that this is a Star Trek episode. It's the total high concept. Our captain is ignoring every proper choice related to Starfleet, and to protocol, and he's choosing to help these mysterious, non-linear wormhole aliens to play out some crazy internal struggle with prophets versus Power Wraith, and the whole thing's just amazing. And I love when he smashes the tablet. He's just so frustrated, and there's a win moment. You talked about her in the last pick, Rapture, David. In this one, she absolutely realizes that the prophets do not give a shit about her. So one embodies Kira, and she sees this, and she goes up to it, and she's like trying to get Kira as a prophet to recognize her, to just say something to her, completely ignores her. And this is really, for me, when Wynn goes full bad, because later in season 7, she actually acknowledges that she's been a person of faith her whole life, but never actually connected or spoken to the prophets. And that's why she goes full bad. And the end, of course, when Wynn is her own lack of faith is why she cancels the fight, seeing everything that Cisco is willing to do. She just can't deal with it. So Cisco's penance is delayed here from the deal he struck with the wormhole aliens and sacrifice of angels. Anyway, just another huge, big episode. And I love when I love caustic Dax in this episode. When she sees the tablet all smashed, she's like, "Let me guess, you accidentally knocked it over." So good. Great episode. Heather, what's your take?
It's like I remember what wasn't it Keiko who first brought the
No, that was the first episode with Paul Rafes, and this is actually the second episode with Paul.
I'm confusing the two of them. I think they're combined in my head, that I have bits and pieces of each of them combined. So it's definitely something I have to rewatch again. But that fight with the two of them on the promenade is like incredible. I love the introduction of the Paul race because I think it gives the duality of the Bajoran religion a little bit. So it's not just all the prophets. There is like a darker side to those things too. So I think it gives it more balance. But
good stuff. Gives it more context. David, what's your take on the Reckoning?
I just remember this episode and thinking that the Pa race really just showed no regard. They gave no F's, as it were, and possessed the emissary's son.
Right.
Just the absolute gall, the audacity to do such a thing for this battle between the Pa race and the prophets. It really showed how dangerous they could be. And it really was a sign of things to come. And I thought that was really, really cool.
Just a crazy choice again, because you see that and then it's like, wait, he's actually going to let this play out? He's going to risk Jake? But he kept saying he had faith that the prophets would protect him. So fascinating stuff. All right, let's go to round one. I can't wait to hear these. Heather, what's your number one high concept Deep Space Nine episode?
All right. So number one, when I was going through like all the episodes that I pulled out to watch for my TrekRanks homework, I realized that some of the most high concept episodes of Deep Space Nine are some of the most legendary, best episodes. And so I really wanted to leave this episode off my list. But then when I rewatched it, I realized I just couldn't because I was too moved by it.
I've been there.
So this subtopic is episode that was too damn good to leave off the list.
Love it. 5
words are write the words, Brother Benny. # It's today that matters. It is season 6, episode 13, Far Beyond the Stars.
I love it. I'm glad you picked it.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to find a way to leave it off, but then I just watched it, and it had been a while since I watched it, and I was just completely moved by the entire episode over again. It's so high concept, especially in the fact that you don't really know what happened by the end of it. Is it a vision? Is it a dream? Is it them both living out their lives together at the same moment in time? It's wonderful. It dives into the racism issue, obviously. So it's really great that they had an opportunity and they found a way to address that in modern Star Trek. It's an incredibly moving performance all around, and it's just an all-time great episode.
Rest easy, Brother Benny. You have walked in the path of the prophets. There is no greater glory.
Tell me, please, who am I?
Don't you know?
Tell me.
You are the dreamer. And the dream.
Yeah, it's an all-time great episode. Once again, it's the writers playing with conventions and telling a really important story in a very literal way, like actually showing you the shit that happened and that people experience, trying to just live. And they do it by tying it all together into their huge narrative of 7 seasons, and Benny Russell and Write the Words. But it's just so good. It's just so good. Of course, Avery Brooks' direction and performance is all-time great Star Trek without any question. David, what's your take on this?
What can I say about Far Beyond the Stars that hasn't already been said ad infinitum? It's pretty much mandatory viewing for me as a Black Star Trek fan. It resonates for me emotionally on an incredibly deep level. The only reason I left it off my list is because it's something that has been spoken about so profoundly, so deeply for so long that it almost reaches the point where there's almost nothing left to say. And there are so many little pieces in this episode. One that I think that maybe gets overlooked is when the writer that is played by Kieran Reese says that there need to be more strong women in sci-fi. Just that, on top of everything else in this episode, there was just so much. There's so much. And this is such a significant piece of television that the only reason I left it off my list is because I feel like at this point, if you're a Star Trek fan, you probably already know.
Yep.
I think that's true. But I'm excited to pick them. We get to talk about it, and it'll tie into my pick a little bit as well. Let's go to David's number one pick. What's your pick, Dave?
My number one pick is really the idea of, when I thought of high concept, and I talked about this in the beginning of the episode, is what I love about DS9 is that it challenges conventions. This is not your daddy's Star Trek. And this is probably not your Star Trek if you're one of the diehards that hold on to the next generation really, really close and tight. And it challenges all of those things that make Star Trek what it is. And I love this episode. It might be just between Trekkies, maybe not to a new viewer, but to Trekkies. This might be the episode of Star Trek in the entire franchise that really defines my Star Trek fandom.
I can't wait to hear this.
And my 5 words are: war is hell, Dr. Bashir. Hashtag, where is Sloan? Inter arma, einem, sealant legus.
This is an awesome pick.
It does the one thing that DS9 was born to do and was all about at its core. It takes Star Trek itself, the very nature of what Star Trek is, and it puts it in front of a mirror. It's so much more than just Alien of the Week or Moral of the Week through sci-fi. It makes everyone that lionizes what they think Star Trek is, what they think Gene Roddenberry's vision was supposed to be, every Jean-Luc Picard speech, every Jim Kirk no-win scenario that is beaten, and it puts it all up to a mirror, and it really gives Star Trek and the Federation and everything that has been built in this franchise, and it kind of puts it in an existential crisis, because here we have the Federation, the United Federation of Planets, this thing that all of us really hold in the highest regard, and it puts it, one, in a war that it's losing. In the past, the Federation has won all of these wars that it's endured, either through a peace treaty or just managing to find a way to beat the bad guys. But here we are in DS9, where the Federation is losing the war badly. They are losing. And Admiral Ross, who I've always said is not a badmiral, he is not a Star Trek bad admiral. He's not a corrupt admiral. He has to make what he clearly sees is an incredibly tough decision to use Section 31 and use the Romulan government and use an ally for the betterment of a Federation, and using Dr. Bashir, who is as pure as it gets, to find a way to make the greater good. And he's not happy with it. He's not okay with it. And at the end of the episode, there's this great scene with Dr. Bashir and Admiral Ross, where Bashir is telling him that what happened was just flat out wrong. And it tells you that the Federation has ideals. It has a standard. But in DS9 and in the Dominion War, that standard is sometimes challenged, and sometimes the rules are bent, and sometimes they're bent almost to the point of being broken. And when you see Benjamin Sisko in the pale moonlight. He's really struggling with what he did to get the Romulans into the war. At the end of this episode, you see just how much Admiral Ross is struggling with what he did to get the necessary intelligence with the Romulans. A Romulan senator that they were allies with was sacrificed. Dr. Bashir was nearly killed several times. And Sloan, God knows what was happening with him. And in my opinion, this is maybe, it might not be the best Star Trek episode, but for me, this is like the Star Trek episode that I feel is most defining for me as a Star Trek fan. Inter arma einem silent legus.
That is a fascinating take. I agree with all of it. It's a spectacular episode. It changes everything you thought you knew. And the ending with Ross, that just always blew me away. I didn't see it coming, wasn't expecting it. Such a great reveal. And I love the way you framed this, like with the purity of Bashir being thrust into this. And it's just like, this is just how it is. In the time of war, the law falls silent. It's absolutely, this is another Ronald D. Moore script, one of his best. Heather, what's your take on Inter Arma Enum Silent Legus?
Yeah, it's one of those episodes that I really love because it highlights that we're not really all above this perfect ideal of the Federation, and that we're still human, and humans still act like this. So like we have flaws, and we're willing to bend and almost break in order to do what we need to do to get things done. It's why DS9 is such an incredible series as a whole. It's why I love Discovery as well, because Discovery went back to a lot of the themes that DS9 did and really highlighted humanity in a lot of its stories like this. And so this episode is just a big highlight of all of that, and how we're not perfect. We're flawed as humans. It happens, and you gotta find the ways to deal with it. And that's one thing this episode highlights really well.
Yeah, it's just another example of how great the Ira Steven Behr finds a way to ground this series and make it real. It's just spectacular work. All right, let's close it out with my number one pick. 5 words in a hashtag. The Sisko's Trek origin story. Hashtag Sisko reaches for the orb. Double hashtag opens it. And it is Shadows and Symbols from Deep Space Nine Season 7. And this is super dense episode. We're not going to talk about the Worf and the Kira storylines, which are awesome on their own. But this pick is all about the Sisko's journey to finally, truly start getting some answers and figuring out kind of who he is and why he's the emissary and where he comes from. And it turns out he's part prophet, wormhole alien, and he's part of their non-linear existence in terms of how he was conceived and how he ended up being the emissary and discovering the wormhole. It's really, really interesting reveal. And I love the orb of the emissary stuff and the scenes connecting back to Benny Russell and Far Beyond the Stars with Casey Biggs there as Dr. Wyckoff trying to convince him to erase the writing that he's in an institution, and he's written his everything out on the walls in contrast to Benny writing it in the magazine and books. And Dr. Wyckoff's literally saying, just no, you have to put the pencil down. You have to erase it. You have to erase yourself.
Deep Space Nine, Captain Sisko and Kira and the others, none of it is real.
All it is to me. If I don't finish my story, if Captain Sisko doesn't open the orb box, then he cannot contact the prophets.
It doesn't matter, Benny. The prophets don't exist. They're all figments of your imagination. Get rid of them. It's the only way that you're going to get well. Now give me the pencil, Ben.
But my story.
It's over. Just let it go.
Benjamin, what are you waiting for? Open it. That's why we're here, right?
It's all really powerful stuff, expertly filmed, and I get chills every time when Benny, the final shot he writes, opens it on the wall, and they show him opening the orb, completes the circle, brings the wormhole back. The entire journey of the Cisco, just some amazing, amazing high concept science fiction. I love this arc. And Heather, what's your take on this one? Shadows and Symbols. Little callback to Benny Russell.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love this episode. I remember the very first time I watched it, I was floored that it connected back to Far Beyond the Stars, because I mean, it kind of leaves you at the end of that episode wondering what's going on and if we're going to understand. And then when they connect back to it in this episode here, it just kind of blew my mind. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're definitely going there.
Yeah.
Like I said, his whole journey throughout Deep Space Nine is just incredible, and it's one of the best parts of the series for me. It's something really, really unique that they got to take him on this journey, and I love it. I can't say anything else than that. I love it.
So unique for Trek. David, what's your take on Shadows and Symbols?
I think that you said it really well there when it was unique for Trek. And that's what made the entire Benjamin Sisko story arc, that it was very, very unique from the first episode where he enters the wormhole to this point where Benny Russell completes the story. It's just incredible writing. And it asks the question, was Benny Russell writing this? Was it all in his mind, or was this Benjamin Sisko's journey? And it's just incredible. Also, Ezri Dax.
Oh yeah, these two episodes, Image in the Sand and Shadows and Symbols, debut Ezri. Love it. And yeah, it's incredible. I love that you brought that up about the Benny Russell world and whether that's the real world or Sisko's the real world. And again, just the fact that they were able to introduce that into Trek, that kind of concept and thought process, but not kind of derail canon and 800 episodes and 50 years of history. Just masterful what Ira Stephen Bear did. It's so good. Okay, let's get into some secondary systems picks.
Let's see what you can do with the secondary systems.
Heather, you got anyone you want to rattle off?
Oh yeah, I have a whole handful here. Definitely the secondary systems for my Orb of Time traveling pick is Trials and Tribulations. I mean, that's as high concept as you can get.
Yes.
I have multiple Trill related, Dax related secondary systems. Facets.
Oh yeah.
Where she goes through the ritual of meeting all of her different selves. Equilibrium, where they first introduced Duran. And Dax from season 1, where she gets put on trial for something Curzon did.
Yeah, Dax is definitely on my list. If I'd done a regular list without my theme, Dax would have been one of my picks. Just the whole joined species being responsible for crimes of a past host is a really high concept idea.
And I have 2 more energy barrier around the planet secondary systems, which is Meridian from season 3. As well as Children of Time, which I could have sworn you would have picked because I know you love that.
I know, I love it. That's also on my secondary systems. Would have been one of my picks if I hadn't gone this route. Meridian would not have been, but I love it.
My last shout out for an episode that I think is just really high concept that I love is the House of Quark, because a Ferengi taking over a Klingon house is high concept. Definitely.
Girl, you've taken my whole list. House of Quark's also on my list. The one where Quark kills a Klingon. It's so good. David, how about you? You want to rattle off a few?
I have a couple. I'll just say the past tense. The Bell Riots. And also really quickly for the uniform. And just the entire arc between Sisko and that damned Michael Eddington.
The Eddington arc is one of my all-time favorites in Trek. You can hear top 5 epic arcs, I think like episode 12, where I talk about it. Okay, I have just one more special shout out to a fun one that is major high concept. The one where everyone gets shrunk really little, one little ship. Awesome, fun, high concept idea. Super cool. All right. Great conversation. I love this topic. Tons of deep cut. Really highlighted how well written and how well told Deep Space Nine is with this topic. Okay, let's get into our regeneration cycle, recap our picks, and relay some stats.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
Okay, Heather, recap your picks.
All right. Number 5. Season 6, episode 17, Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. Number 4, season 7, episode 13, Field of Fire. Number 3, season 4, episode 9, Our Man Bashir. Number 2, season 6, episode 25, The Sound of Her Voice. And number 1, season 6, episode 13, Far Beyond the Stars.
Okay, I love this. You had 3 from season 6, and then 1 from season 7, 1 from season 4, and you had 2 picks where the entire cast is playing different characters with Our Man Bashir and Far Beyond the Stars. David, recap your 5 picks.
My number 5, that would be season 4, episode 16, Bar Association. Number 4, that would be from season 5, episode 19, Ties of Blood and Water. Number 3, season 4, episode 18, Rules of Engagement. And number 2, season 4, episode 19. I guess I really liked season 4 DS9. That would be Hard Time. And number 1 was season 7, episode 16, Inter Arma Einum Sealant Legis.
Brilliant. Yeah, you had 3 from season 4, which is interesting. And then 1 from season 5, 1 from season 7. And my 5 picks recap: round 5 from season 3, Destiny. Round 4 from season 4, A Session. Round 3, Rapture from season 5. Round 2, season 6, The Reckoning. And my number 1 pick from season 7, Shadows and Symbols. You can kind of tell there's 1 episode per season for me. So I had 1 from season 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in chronological order. I will say, going into this, I thought maybe Deep Space Nine wasn't quite the same high concept territory as other series, and I think that still might be true, but man, we uncovered the way it's high concept in such a different way, because the writing on these episodes we talked about is so good. All right, so a couple of quick stats. We had no duplicates. We had
none.
No defiant torpedoes. You never know. But I'm surprised, but that's really cool. We had 2 episodes featuring orbs. We had 1 holodeck. We had 4 that were a little bit of time travel element. And our season breakdown, we had none from season 1 and season 2, and only 1 from season 3. Then there was 2 from season 5, 3 from season 7. Season 6 had 4 picks, and season 4, which is really strong, led the way with 5 overall picks. So impressive. I love it. But as we do every week, we have been hit by temporal distortion. So before we get apart, it's time to hear from you.
The temporal distortions are fracturing space-time throughout the ship. Cause?
Unknown.
Oh, we know the cause, Mr. Tuvok. It's all the amazing feedback that we continue to receive from our listeners here at TrekRanks, and this week's Temporal Distortion has sent us back to 2 great episodes from the TrekRanks archive. First up, we're going all the way back to episode 71 and our fantastic top 5 meta Trek references. One of my favorite episodes that we've ever done. I love that topic. And we got this one, that was like a year and a half ago. So we got this one from Wayne Frazier recently. It was at Wayne Frazier on Twitter. Really quick, his number 5 from Maps and Legends, from Picard, Vasquez Rocks. I love that reference. His number 4 pick was the Read Alert from Enterprise and Singularity, the playoff Red Alert. His number 3, Until They've Drafted That Directive from Enterprise, Dear Doctor. A great meta reference. Number 2, Lucille Ball reference from Enterprise, Carbon Creek. And his number 1 from Lower Decks, No Small Parts, is Those Old Scientists and TOS. A fantastic list. You can tell it's fresh because it's got no small parts in it. All right, our second list is from one of our most recent shows, a patented TrekRanks topic from episode 107, the top 5 improvements, as vague as it gets. And we got another list from the king of alliteration. It's Mr. Rich Masters. We got to get him on the show. At Masters Rich on Twitter. So all of his picks are alliterative. Number 5, bye-bye broccoli bonst baddies. Hashtag
nice.
Kaz. The K's gone. It's Basics Part 2, and he's ripping the Kazon, who I like. I'm like the only person who likes the Kazon. Bye-bye broccoli bonst baddies. Brilliant. Okay, number 4, empath embraces exacting ensemble edict. Hashtag uniformality, and it is chain of command when Deanna Troi gets a uniform. And I swear I didn't plan this. I was going through the feedback, and I picked these 2 lists randomly, and then I noticed they had a common thread in the soup round. These things just happen on TrekRanks. So his number 3 is the Nobulance discovery drives directive discourse. Hashtag primed directive. And it's Dear Doctor, which is the same pick Wayne had for his number 3 for the prime directive and Dear Doctor. His number 2, casual criminal comes committed cadet. Hashtag first in class. Of course, it's Nog in Heart of Stone.
Red Squad.
Red Squad. Oh, Nog, we love you. That is a great improvement. Nog joining Starfleet. And then his number 1, Ben brings Borg battling battleship. Hashtag no longer stationary. And it's the Defiant Torpedoes. Let's hear them. It's the Search Part 1. And we finally got our Defiant Torpedoes. I love it. All right.
We had to get our Defiant Torpedoes somehow.
I didn't plan that. It worked out. It always works out here on TrekRanks. Those picks, more than enough to clear ourselves from this week's Temporal Distortion. So as always, I want to thank everyone for your great responses to us here at TrekRanks. Keep your list coming to me at TrekRanks so we can retweet them. But we also want to hear from you. Put together your own list of top 5 high-concept DS9 episodes or a list from any of our past shows. Give us a call at the Tricorder Transmission, 609-512-5527, or just record it and send me a DM. We can do it that way. So hopefully we'll hear from you so you can be featured on the next episode of TrekRanks. And on the next episode of TrekRanks, we're doing another one of those oddball TrekRanks topics that, honestly, I'm not even sure what it means yet. So the topic, this is a challenge for you guys. The topic is Trek Minutia. That's it. It's just Trek Minutia, and minutia is defined as small, precise, trivial details of something. And in this case, it's Star Trek. So there you go. We're looking for small, precise, trivial details of Star Trek. Could be in universe, could be from the production side. I think this is going to be a fun one. So Heather and David, it's a tough one to come in on cold, but if you had to choose one little piece of Trek minutia to highlight, something that pops into your head, what would it be? Heather.
I got one already.
All right.
Thanks to our dear friend Thad Haight, the first thing that popped into my head was rank pips.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, there's so much minutia with rank pips. We could do just a show on that stuff. That's perfect. And yeah, Thad is an authority on that, to say the least. David, how about you, man? Any Trek minutia jumping into your head?
Sensors. And I am so grateful for Lower Decks pointing that out and making that a thing. Because, that's a thing. And they say it. Sensors.
Are you making fun of me? Because I mispronounce words. Brilliant pick, David. That is exactly the kind of Trek minutia we're looking for. The fact that on Star Trek,
and it makes fun of Trek minutia too.
Sensors, I love it. It's so good, so good. All right, that's gonna be a fun one. All right, that's it. Let's wrap it up. A huge thanks to Heather Kirby and David Majors. Great to have you guys both on the show.
I was wondering if you could show me how to access these subspace communications logs.
And we're going to do that right now, Mr. Neelig. So any final Trek subspace communications you guys want to relay, let's hear about Promenade Merchants. Heather.
Well, yeah, if you want to listen to more of us, you can follow us on Twitter at PromTrekPod. That is our Twitter handle for the Promenade Merchants podcast. We try to release an episode once every 2 weeks or so where we talk about the old, new, and upcoming business of Star Trek. And David makes lots of jokes.
It's a great podcast because you just
some of them are occasionally good.
They're good, and you just get a little bit of everything. You never know what you're going to get. It's an awesome Star Trek conversation every week. So, David, thanks for coming on TrekRanks. Really appreciate it, man.
It is an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. Like Heather said, everybody, the Promenade Merchants podcast. Get it wherever you get your podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Spotify, be it Stitcher, via a regular old RSS feed. Look for it by name, the Promenade Merchants podcast. Follow us on Twitter. Send us an email, promenadetrekpod, the whole thing, promenadetrekpod@gmail.com. Say, hey, let us know whether you want me to stop making jokes or not, or whether the times that I've swore on the podcast upset you, because people get upset about that kind of thing with Star Trek.
Oh, but that.
There it is.
Swearing is allowed on Star Trek now. That's what we always like.
That's right. And
great.
again, Jim, thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. We will definitely have you guys back. Fantastic job. And thanks, everyone, again, for engaging with us. And check out the Promenade Merchants. They do a great job. All right. Thanks, everyone, for engaging with us here on episode 115 of the TrekRanks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
Let me guess. You accidentally knocked it over.
Not exactly.
I didn't think so.
So what did happen? I just had this uncontrollable urge to smash the tablet.
Oh, I get those urges all the time. Of course, I never act on them.
Just want to remind everyone again that the entire TrekRanks catalog is available for you to download and listen to at TrekRanks.com and on your podcast player of choice. Our episodes never get carbon dated, so check out the topics you've missed and maybe just want to listen to again over at TrekRanks.com. And a reminder to check out our friends 5-Year Mission at 5yearmission.net. They're writing a song for every episode of Star Trek, and you won't believe how great their music is. They also have a podcast at the Trek Geeks Network, so seek them out. You won't regret it.
Admiral Vassery, welcome to the Cerritos.
Starfleet commends your bravery and ingenuity. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to work. Apparently, we've picked up a strange signal on our sensors.
Quite all right, Admiral. And what did your sensors show?
Well, nothing at first, but the long-range sensors revealed...
Whoa. I am sorry. Are you trying to say the word sensors? Because to me, you're saying sensors. What is that?
Well, that's how it's said. Sensors. Everyone knows that.
Sensors. Yes, that's right. It sounds right to me.
Me too. I say it like that.
What? No, you don't. This is nuts. Yo, she's making fun of you, dummy. She doesn't say sensors.
Well, of course I do.
Stop it.
Is this how your crew treats authority? When it's known I mispronounce things? Are you really making fun of me?
Admiral, no. I thought we came to an understanding.
Maybe you need to adjust your sensors.
Would you just stop?
I have never been shown such disrespect. Is she yawning?